Right now, if you search for Tartaria, you'll find two completely different answers. One side says it was a vast empire, more advanced than anything history admits, deliberately erased by the people who replaced it. The evidence, they say, is hiding in plain sight. The other side says it never existed, that it's a conspiracy theory built on misread maps and misunderstood architecture, that the people who believe it are simply wrong. Both sides are louder than the evidence. So let's look at what the evidence actually says. Because the real story of Tartaria is stranger than the conspiracy, and more interesting than the debunking. There was a place called Tartaria. It appears on European maps dating back to the 13th century. It covers a vast territory, stretching from Eastern Europe across Central Asia all the way to the Pacific coast. On some maps, it takes up more space than any other region on Earth. Medieval cartographers weren't inventing it, they were recording something real. But what exactly were they recording? In 1245, Pope Innocent IV sent a Franciscan friar named Giovanni da Pian del Carpine on a diplomatic mission to the Mongol Empire. He traveled further east than almost any European before him. When he returned, he wrote a detailed account of what he found. He called the people he encountered Tartars. The name stuck. For the next 5 centuries, European mapmakers labeled the vast territories of Central Asia and Siberia as Tartaria. It wasn't a single unified empire with a capital city and a flag. It was a geographic label, a catch-all term for everything east of Russia that Europeans didn't fully understand. Think of it like this. Medieval Europeans called the entire continent below the Mediterranean Africa, without understanding its full complexity. They called everything east of Persia India, without knowing where India actually ended. Tartaria was the same thing applied to Central Asia, a real place. Imprecisely understood, broadly labeled. That's the historical Tartaria. But then something happened in the 19th century that the conspiracy theory latches onto, and gets almost completely wrong. In the early 1800s, Tartaria disappeared from maps, not gradually, relatively quickly by cartographic standards. The conspiracy theory says this proves deliberate erasure, that a powerful civilization was wiped from the historical record by shadowy forces who rewrote history. The actual explanation is less dramatic, but genuinely fascinating. Russia happened. Between the 17th and 19th centuries, the Russian Empire systematically expanded eastward across Siberia and Central Asia. As Russian explorers, soldiers, and cartographers moved through the region, they replaced the vague label of Tartaria with specific, accurate geographic names. The Kazakh steppe, the Siberian plain, the Mongolian plateau. Tartaria didn't disappear because someone erased it. It disappeared because Europeans finally learned what was actually there. The same thing happened to Terra Incognita on older maps. When explorers charted Antarctica, the label disappeared. Nobody conspired to erase Terra Incognita. The unknown simply became known. But here's where it gets genuinely interesting, because the conspiracy theory doesn't actually care much about the maps. What it really cares about is the buildings, specifically a category of 19th century architecture found across North America, Europe, and Russia that conspiracy theorists call Tartarian architecture. Grand buildings, ornate facades, enormous domes, columns, arched windows, a visual richness that feels almost impossibly elaborate for the era in which it was supposedly built. The claim goes like this. These buildings are too sophisticated to have been constructed by the civilization history credits them to. The technology didn't exist. The labor force wasn't available. The timeline doesn't add up. Therefore, they must have been built by a previous civilization, a more advanced one. The one history erased, Tartaria. It's a compelling argument if you don't look too closely. When you do look closely, something interesting happens. The architectural style conspiracy theorists call Tartarian has an actual name, Beaux-Arts. It emerged from the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris in the late 18th century. It spread across Europe and America through the 19th century as the dominant style for civic buildings. Courthouses, train stations, libraries, museums, the ornate facades, the enormous columns, the elaborate stonework. All of it is documented. Architects are named, construction records exist, photographs of buildings under construction survive. We know who built them, when, how, and why. In 1871, the Chicago fire destroyed most of central Chicago. The city was rebuilt in approximately 20 years in exactly the architectural style conspiracy theorists call Tartarian. We have the contracts, we have the blueprints, we have photographs of the construction process. Nobody erased the builders. They're in the historical record. But here's the genuinely interesting question the conspiracy theory accidentally raises. Why did this style appear so suddenly and spread so rapidly? The answer is the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, known as the White City. Architect Daniel Burnham assembled the greatest designers in America and built a temporary city of white neoclassical buildings on the Chicago lakefront. It ran for 6 months. 27 million people attended, roughly half the population of the United States at the time. It was the most visited event in American history up to that point, and it completely transformed American architecture overnight. Cities across the country looked at the White City and decided that's what civic buildings should look like: grand, imposing, classical, permanent. Within 2 decades, courthouses, libraries, and train stations from New York to San Francisco were built in the same style. Not because a hidden civilization built them, because 27 million Americans saw something beautiful and decided to copy it. So, where does that leave us? Tartaria was real. It was a geographic label applied to Central Asia by European cartographers who were working at the edge of their knowledge. The people who lived there were nomadic and semi-nomadic cultures of extraordinary complexity, from the Mongols to the Kazakhs to dozens of smaller groups. They left real traces, real architecture, real records, real genetic signatures that modern DNA analysis is only beginning to fully understand. What they didn't leave was a unified advanced empire that was deliberately erased from history. That part is a story we told ourselves. But here's what's worth sitting with. The conspiracy theory exists for a reason. When people look at a 19th century courthouse and feel that it's too beautiful, too elaborate, too sophisticated to have been built by ordinary people in ordinary time, that feeling isn't wrong exactly. It's pointing at something real. We did build those things. Ordinary people with ordinary tools and extraordinary collective will build them. And then we stopped. The architectural ambition of the 19th century, the idea that a public library or a train station should be as beautiful as a cathedral, largely died in the 20th century. We replaced it with concrete boxes and glass towers. Maybe the reason people reach for a lost civilization to explain the beautiful old buildings isn't because they're gullible. Maybe it's because they can't quite believe that we were once capable of that. And stopped. Tartaria wasn't erased. We just forgot what we were capable of.